faith is living a life that is left in the dark. Can I preach this, if you will? That if God told you everything about your circumstance, everything about your situation, everything that you ought to walk in and become a part of, many of us would have never made a step forward, and many of us would have waved our own white flag in the process. That if God actually showed you the process to get to your promise, many of us would have quit a long time ago. But thanks be to God, God had enough sense, God had enough capacity, God had enough omniscience about himself that he chose to lead us in the dark. Can I make this plain? Abraham was God's friend. He was Abram, and then his name was changed to Abraham, and then God spoke to Abraham and said, Abraham, I'm about to give you a nation that nobody can count. Abraham, I'm about to take you to a land that nobody has yet experienced. But along the process, Abraham had to make some challenges. He had to surmise himself through some difficulties. And then on the other side of his difficulties, he began to realize his own destiny. God would be an irresponsible parent if he gave him everything and never allowed him to stretch forward and become what God had called him to be. And I'm already preaching to somebody, because here's the thesis of my message: God's promise to see you through to the end of your journey. Hear me now. He did not promise that he will let you in on his plans for your life, but he did promise that his presence would be with you even while you're being left in the dark. And that ought to shout somebody today, because even though you will experience some darkness in life, you will never be left alone, because the God I serve, y'all missed that, a good shout there, the God I serve, he promised that he'll be with you and he will never forsake you. The God that I serve is a God who makes his promises and always keeps his word. And I don't know who I'm talking to already, but this kind of God will set you up for not only success but perfection in the role and the authority you're getting ready to walk in. Here we are already in our text for this moment. God's presence would be fortified if the Jews would follow any other gods or trifle with idolatry, as especially the golden calf. His presence is a promise and reassuring by the renewal and rededication of those who are called out of darkness into his marvelous light. Here God orders the removal of any ornaments. These must have been religious trinkets or medallions that suggest another form of compromise, and God will have none of it. Moses is also evident in the intimate fellowship with God through his spiritual concerns. These verses, if you will, may be divided up into three sections, but I'm just dealing with section number one. Moses first wanted to know that the Lord's intentions for his people was good. God had told Moses to lead the people, but without God's presence, Moses was really concerned. God knew Moses by name, that is, Moses belonged to God. So Moses wanted to continue to learn God's ways and enjoy God's grace and favor. Moses interceded on behalf of the nation by reminding God that they were his people. In response, the Lord reversed his threat not to go with them and to give them rest. That's a good shout, because in Moses' second request was for confirmation that the Lord would indeed go with his people. In verses 15 through 17, the absence of God's presence with them in their journey to the promised land would pose severe problems for their God and for their reputation. So again, God allows Moses to agree with Moses' request, assures Moses that he was pleased with them, and then Moses asked God to see the glory glory of God. This request was fulfilled as God allowed Moses to have more than a profound vision of his glory, proclaiming God's name, his revealed character to Moses. God allowed him to see his goodness and at his back, not in his face. Because if you know anything about the scriptures, had Moses seen the face of God, he would not have lived to testify about it. This passage begins to shout us because it demonstrates that while people can honestly know God, they can never know him exhaustively. Don't you realize that God is omnipresent, that he's everywhere at the same place and at the same time at once? Don't you know that God is omniscient, that he knows all, he sees all, even though he never always reveal all? Don't you know that God is omnipotent, that he got all power in his hand, that if God decided to fall, he could because he is God? I know you got the kind of theology that says that God can't fail. Well, if God decides to fail, he can because he is God. For here the Bible says in verse 14, the Lord replied, my presence will go with you and I will give you rest. Whew, let me preach this the way I feel it.